Constructive Criticism is sponsored by Oasis Games. MTGOasis.com is the place to get cards for your next Magic event. Try them out with code CCMTG for 15% off of your first order, and use the code WouldThatBeGood for 4% off of every order. Want to support the show directly? Head on over to patreon.com/CCMTG to check out some awesome benefits and future goals for the show. Thanks for listening, and here's this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructed Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at PureMTGO.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructedCriticism.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 406th episode of Constructed Criticism. I am your Reno Jackson host, Mason, joined by my Sir Finley Mergleton host, Spencer Hallen, and my Elise the Starseeker co-host, Abe. Y'all, it's all about Explorer today, so I did a Hearthstone reference. Do you get it?
Dude, that was as bad as having Kyrie Irving on your team in the NBA trying to, be a super team, right, Abe?
I'm not a basketball guy, but I trust you as that guy doesn't believe the earth is round.
I'm just saying, if you are a millionaire, not just a little bit of a millionaire, like a big millionaire.
NBA superstar millionaire?
Yeah. You can literally have somebody let you fly a plane around the earth. That is that is an option available to you. How you could be a flat earther? Yeah,
it's not
true.
that hard. You can just hit up Elon and be like,
it's true. It's true.
Let me get on the space machine. And
it's true.
Like, dope, tweet about it, and then I was go.
I was talking to Abe about this in the pre-show before Mason joined, but it is a definite always improving moment for Mr. Kyrie here. The dude clearly needs to be always improving and needs to help himself and his team and be a little bit more self-aware. That's what this podcast is all about, right, Mason?
100%. I gotta say, I love the interview I saw. Not interview. Shaq was on our show. This is my basketball player right now. I know Shaq of the Chicago Bulls. That's all I know. And Kobe Bryant. Anyways, he was on the show and he asked the question, "What's further, New York to LA or New York to the moon?" And he's like, "I know how long it is to New York to LA. I've ridden on a plane, but I've never gone to the moon, so I just don't know, but it seems like they do it pretty quickly." And then they went to commercial break and they came back and he was laughing and they're like, "It's a couple thousand miles to the moon. It takes a minute."
I got a story about this. I gotta drop this on the podcast. So my first MTG teammate I ever had, it's my roommate, my best friend, Gavin. I love you. I did a podcast with Gavin. You can't find it. Don't look for it. But we were having a conversation one time. If you are local to Utah and you're listening to the podcast, you will understand how ridiculous this is. But he said that it was farther, the moon was about as far as Provo was from Salt Lake City. And for those who don't know, Provo to Salt Lake City is about 60 to 62 miles. And I was like, I just want to understand something, Gavin. You think that it's 60 miles to the moon? He's like, yeah. We live in a place that, just like Denver, has a mile high elevation. Do you think it's 58 miles to the moon from our mountains? Yeah. It's no, bro.
By the way, in case you're curious, it takes 3 days to get to the moon. It's very far.
In good standing, at the speed of rocket jets.
Yeah. Now, at the speed at which we can reasonably get there. The Flash does it all the time, so does Superman.
Speaking of speed, how fast are we going to get to the point of this podcast, Mason?
I was about to segue there. It's just 4 minutes, baby. Just a couple minutes. We got a little before the clap, too, so, we're good to go. But it is all about Explorer today. This is the newest arena format. I know. Hopefully the last one for a long time. But we've got one last new one we're going to talk all about. It's very exciting. It's Pioneer Plus, if you haven't really heard about it. Or Pioneer Minus, I should say. We're going to get more into that later, but first we need to do always improving. It is the main point of the show. My always improving moment, take the reins here even more, is I'm jumping into limited. I've done listening to Sam Black a little bit. I got some Lords of Limited, I believe is their name, or Limited Lords. I'm dyslexic. Don't
Lords of Limited is Lords of Limited is in fact Marshall. I love you, buddy. If you're listening somehow, as one of the godfathers of constructive criticism, the person that helped us get this started. I love you. I'm sorry our listeners were so mean to you when you started your constructed show, but I do think Lords of Limited is like legitimately the second best limited podcast. That the way that they do the show is insane.
By the way, side note, did you know Marshall has a very successful watch restoration YouTube channel?
I did know this. I've thought about buying watches because of it.
He has like 2.5 million subscribers, Abe, on this YouTube channel. Yeah, I knew. If you're watching the video, you'll see Abe. Abe was like kind of like whatever, Mason. But I saw it because he was in a local news report. They like did an interview with Marshall. It was very wild. Yeah. So my always free moment. This is the start of the journey to get Capenna down, and here's why. I'm gonna get my little prelude. I'll be checking in every now and again. I'm not gonna give you a week by week, but basically my LGS does this thing where every F&M is draft on. That's all they do is draft. All the constructed stuff's on the weekend. And they do this league thingy where they're like, hey, we track your points, your match points, and the top 8 from our drafts from when the set starts to right before it ends, they get invited to an 8-person draft, all expenses paid. Winner gets a set booster, and like second place gets half, blah, 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 blah. And the limited is the weakest part of my game by a margin that cannot be described eloquently on the show. So I want to improve that, and having this factor, this little motivating thing. I don't want to not top 8. I want to compete. I want to have the incentives or whatever, and I want to win. I want to get the box. So this is it. I'm hopeful this limited is fun because I'm hot committed to like 8 or 9 F&Ms I normally wouldn't play, and doing a bunch of stuff and doing a bunch of content, or like indulging a bunch of content. So that's my always improving moment. I'm got some early stuff of limited. I know some cards by their art. I'm ready. I didn't do the pre-release, but I'm ready.
Did you do the arena package to get your really good price on drafts?
No.
You could probably still get it during this podcast for what it's worth, if you want to do that during our always improving moments. But it's actually a really good price for. You also get a sealed token, so you can like learn the limited format a little bit before you do your drafts. It's actually a pretty good deal. It is one of the things that, while I've been a pretty big in opposition of Arena's economy, that package specifically is actually pretty good. It looks like Abe is agreeing with me.
Yeah, no, like I don't personally buy because I don't like to put money into Arena, but I will say that like my friends who do, they're all like, yeah, it's the only thing I'll ever buy. And
yeah, there was a while where that was how I would do Arena. It was just that package because it's like $50 for 3 drafts and a sealed. And it like basically free rolled me through every draft format for, it was like a lot of sets.
Yeah, so my always improving this week was also New Capenna Limited related. For the people who listened to the pre-show, the patrons who caught that heard me talking about how I'm really excited to go to SCG Con Pittsburgh and play the main event this weekend. But I, for the first time in a very long time, actually have sat down with the full card list and like hashed out the mechanics and the implications of the format down to the stat lines, and really like done a full-on like Pro Tour level prep that I used to do for people and help people with for limited. And it's really just been good to get in the weeds bit. I was actually practicing this process for a couple of weeks now with Eternal TCG, which is a digital TCG that I've been playing on the recommendation of my friend Jonathan, and really just digging into what makes, like, what are the quote unquote rules of the format, like, how not only how draft archetypes wind up breaking out, but also like how you would sit in the seat and draft them, what the important cards to be looking at in the sealed pools are, making notes of rares that I need to play with more to really understand if they're good or not, baselines of the format that I'm looking to try to have, and just taking all this time to really study up and be prepared for an event has been, and especially like back to back after doing it for this other game, have really been like refreshing. And I feel like I've learned a lot and just noted how much better I've gotten at doing it overall since the times that I was doing these long write-ups for Pro Tour testing teams that I was working with, in just the way that I'm thinking about it, the way I'm processing it, the things I've learned probably like 4 years ago now that I was doing that back around like Hour of Devastation and Amonkhet, into doing it now. The things that I think about differently, the way that I'm able to approach it, really, like, not only do I feel like I'm doing a really good job of it right now, I also feel like I'm seeing how far I've come, which has been really, really gratifying. So
I would like to kind of jump on that, because while you guys can probably see what I put into the show notes for my iOS Improving Moment, it's a pretty big deal to do with learning from other games in a lot of ways. I really like the point that you made, which is something that I've gotten bad at, which is using the things that you're doing elsewhere to improve at Magic. And I have done that in specific ways of like looking for opportunities to improve at Magic. As many of you who are listening know, their Crown 2 is coming up in Utah, which is I think it's a gold level Smash World Tour event for Melee and Smash Brothers Ultimate. I've had some pretty huge strides in Smash over the last little while, to the point where I switched mains, which is, I can't really express how hard that is to like a Magic podcast, but like today, my testing partner, former host of the show, Matt Kling, was like, Pokemon Trainer is now your best character, like by a lot. Like it was a good switch. You like made a good decision. But what has happened, I think as a result of how much I've been focusing on Smash, is I think I got pretty lazy in Magic. I did find a lot of opportunities from Smash to help me find ways to improve, but I'll kind of talk about specifically what happened. I actually noticed this, Mason, when you messaged me about Mono White, a deck that I had pretty much been championing pretty hard, right, in the Discord and other places. And Mason's like, hey, do you have an updated Mono White list? And I thought about it. I was like, dude, I haven't updated that deck in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Like, I've just been playing the same thing. And mostly it was because I was practicing Pokemon Trainer and Smash. That was where I was focusing my time. And I was like, man, that's really weird. So like I had started to put more time into Magic and split my time between Magic and Smash. But what ended up happening is that, I don't know if it was this week or the week before, I was playing ladder and events on Arena as I was trying to figure out where I was landing on the format, basically, for Standard before the new set dropped. I think I 2-2'd 3 events in a row and went 50% on ladder as far as my stat recorder told me, for like quite a while. And I was like, this is not normal for me, right? Like there's probably a lot of people that would be really happy with 50% win percentage, but it's at least 10 to 15% lower than probably my norm. And it's like, okay, well, what's happening? And pretty quickly I realized that I was turning Magic into, I don't know if a chore is the right word, or if like, I think that a lot of us, Mason, myself, Michael, Matt, I don't know if you've ever talked about this, Abe, where like we just start to go through the motions of Magic rather than actually being an active participant in the game. I think that I had become pretty lazy in Magic. And I think that overall, there are a lot of little things that you can do in Magic that as you get better and better, you start to discount that you're doing them. And then eventually, I think that you can start to ignore them out of laziness, and then you start to fall. A really good example of this I'll talk about later, but like the reason that I noticed this was there was a moment where I did combat math to see if my opponent was dead. And I was like, I don't actually remember the last time I did this. Because what had ended up happening for a lot of it was, this looks good, I'll do this a lot of the time. While that works out a lot of the time, it does not work out in those moments where you actually have to do the math. Like you actually have to figure it out. And then I found a lot of different moments where that was happening. And so for me, this week, I realized that my frustrations with Magic, where I felt like I was getting unlucky, were actually coming from me not being an active participant, like me not taking part in the games in the way that I should, whether it's simple math or sequencing my lands, or I think I talked about it a few weeks ago where like I had a loss in the team event that I played with Quentin and Matt where I didn't look at my opponent's graveyard and didn't realize that like I had 1 turn or 2 turns or something, and then I lost that game. I won that match, but like that could have cost my team. And it's like, okay, I'm clearly being lazy in Magic right now. And I think that realizing those moments is a pretty big deal to me right now, as my time is stretched between multiple games, but also because I think that I'm good enough to not have those moments. I can actually actively participate and improve, and that is a better use of my time than just going through the motions. So that's my always improving moment.
Yeah, it's a lot like practicing good basketball leads to good basketball. Practicing sloppy basketball leads to sloppy basketball. You know what I mean? Same thing. And so I love that one. It's a important one. It's an easy one to slip into. But honestly, I find the game way more fun when we don't slip into those things. So I'm glad you're noticing that.
I put that in the show notes, and I didn't really touch on it, but I had not been having fun with Magic for like a couple weeks, like maybe 2 to 3. I was like, man, this is weird, because like I'm really excited about Magic. Like, what's not fun about it? And what you just said, Mason, where it's like the game is more fun. I specifically was having fun when I had that moment of doing combat math. I was like, I really want to win this game. I think this is a good matchup for me. I am engaged. And then I was like, holy crap. I haven't been doing this for weeks. No wonder I haven't been having fun. I haven't been engaged. I don't know how hard that is to recognize, but it was hard for me.
Yeah, I can't think of a single time where I've not had that experience with some game I'm playing, where I'll kind of fall into playing out of habit, or like, you know, just taking the easiest, like best looking option, and like not playing with full consideration, not like playing to play my best. And, you know, that's really, I feel like, where like a huge sign of burnout to me when I recognize it myself is when I'm doing that. Because when I'm doing that, that's ultimately what leads to me being like, I've just played so much and I'm not getting anywhere, and, you know, I'm not making progress forward, I'm not winning as much as I want to. And it's like, well, I'm not even giving it my all in the first place, and now I'm feeling tired of doing it because I'm spending all this time doing it without actively participating in it. And sometimes the answer is you just need to start being more cognizant and play more. And sometimes the answer is, you know, in those times where you find yourself not really caring about it or thinking about doing something else, sometimes you just need to put it down and then come back to it when you do actually have the energy and the care to think about the games you're playing. And that's something that, you know, I actually do a lot. Like, one of the reasons I've been playing so much Eternal instead of playing a lot of Modern or Pioneer is that when I find myself sitting down to play those formats right now, I don't really have motivation or drive to be doing anything that really engages me right now with the format, whereas Eternal was really drawing me into that. So I found that I've improved a lot, you know, not only in Eternal, but in the things that I've learned through learning about that game and being able to apply them backwards and laterally into Magic and into the way that I prepare for things has been really, really helpful, because it's made my entire process feel fresh. Whereas, like, you know, now that New Capenna's out and I'm very interested in the limited format, I have this drive and attention towards that. And so I can play actively without being in the spot of like, well, I don't want to draft when it comes out on Wednesday. I'm just all I've done is play Modern leagues for like 2 weeks now, and I don't really feel like I'm getting anywhere. So that feeling is really, really good to recognize for a lot of reasons. So I'm glad that it's something that you're able to be working with, Spencer.
You've prompted a question, and I think that it's important for the listeners to recognize that like these moments can come from those people close to you, but like you're two of the people that I trust in Magic probably the most right now. So I'm going to ask this. It was pretty hard for me to recognize and come to this moment of realization. And if you don't have an answer, that's okay. I'm putting you both on the spot, but like, how do you find these moments? Like, how do you recognize that you're in these lulls or these moments of like, is it just that you're not having fun? Like, how do you catch yourself?
Do you have an answer, Abe? Because I have a rough answer.
You shoot first.
Okay. The biggest way I find myself, and it's like two-part there to the lulls, right? To like being engaged versus like not engaging, right? So like with not engaging, I catch myself because what happens is I'll play some, and I'll think about why the games I'm playing, don't get me wrong. But then a lot of the other time in my free time, I'm thinking about the games passively and kind of rewriting them and stuff. And I can't figure out why I didn't do something where I have like a harder time, that sort of stuff. That's a pretty big tell to me that I'm not engaging. And it's like harder to remember and think about what was going wrong and try to figure stuff out. Another one is honestly like when I'm not for like specifically leagues. Like if I'm not for winning leagues, I often like stop myself and think like, why am I not doing my normal? My rate of play is about I 4-1 about every league I play when I try. I've been keeping track of it for a while now. It's pretty accurate. And so when I start like 3-2 and 2-3 leagues, I'm like, what's going wrong? These sort of things. Often it's I'm not actually playing Magic and I'm playing Magic where I am like, I enjoy, believe it or not, I enjoy playing Magic. It's a fun, enjoyable thing. It's easy to not be playing at your actual best all the time. And so that's one way where I catch myself. And those are like the big ones. And then when it comes to not having fun, that one's a little harder. I rarely don't have fun playing Magic. In fact, I would say the times I have the least fun is when my deck is the best deck by a lot. I hate having like easy matchups all the time. So I think when I start crushing and dominating with the deck is when I'm at the lowest enjoyment of fun.
I'll go back to your first point. This is how I noticed it, right? It was like the 50% win percentage was like a pretty big giveaway to me. I was like, well, this isn't normal for me. Like what's going on here? But I think I should be able to catch it before that. I mean, maybe it's not possible. Maybe, I don't know, like a good comparison here, but like maybe you can't see that you're doing something wrong until you do something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to like know when you're not bringing your best. Like I had a moment. I'm in this Mario Golf League in a Discord. This is like a really deep cut of like knowing when you're not playing
like the new one that just came,
like the new, not the one that just came to Switch through the
N64,
like the N64 one,
because that's multiplayer now, right?
Yeah, you can do that, but not that one. The
okay,
one
so
for the Switch.
So that'll be a Patreon goal. We'll all play Mario Golf, try to beat Abe.
I'm not good at the N64 one. If you have Super Rush, you might be able to beat me if you're really good, but I am pretty good at that game.
Is that the new Switch one?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I'm in a league for that game. Just a fun one to like play with people.
I think that you underestimate Mason's want to just beat somebody at something he spent exactly 7 hours on.
I've seen the Mason tier list. I know that he doesn't even like Mario Golf.
Yeah, but you didn't challenge him to do something he hates to beat you.
He's seen me play a league match, I think, in season 1 of the league.
I did. Me and Ginger ghosted Abe, and we were like, "Oh, this guy hit the shot!" Like the entire time, just like yelling in Abe's ear.
But yeah. So I had this moment where it was Passover last week, which means I was like under the strict dietary restriction. We had to re-record the episode. I was like a little angsty and frustrated about that situation happening, and like for a million reasons I was like not playing my best, and I wound up losing this match where I was like definitely better than my opponent if we ran it like 99 times, but like that day I wasn't in it, I wasn't playing well, and I had to ask myself like, why did that just happen? Like, what are you doing out here, man? What's going on that's making you play so below your average game? Like asking that question to myself, I like thought of all these things. I was like, yeah, of course I'm like not really in it to play this game right now. Like I should have like either rescheduled it to another day or like, taking more care if I really wanted to win, but it wasn't in it. And when it comes to Magic, I'll have days where I'm like not feeling like I'm playing my A game, or I have a spot where I'm like, I definitely could have played that better. Why wasn't I asking myself questions? Which is my number one thing that I think is where I catch myself, is when I stop asking myself questions while I'm playing, when I stop allowing myself to have an internal process that leads to discovering information about my opponent's hand or, about what they're planning to do. When I stop thinking about the game on that dynamic and trying to solve it, that's when I know that I'm like checked out and need to evaluate what's going on.
Yeah, I think that was my second moment of realizing how disengaged I was, for what it's worth. Yeah, when I started playing around Go Blank, I was like, oh, this is why this card is so frustrating, because I haven't played around it for like a month, and now I just beat 3 Go Blank decks in a row because I did it. And for context, the second I made this change, I immediately posted an updated deck list to Twitter that I 5-1'd with in an arena event. It's like, okay, well, it's an arena event, Spencer. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because like I got 3 to, I don't even know. I think it was 5 2-2s in a row. I don't think it's that hard to get 5 wins right now on an arena event, right? And so like the fact that I wasn't getting them was really weird, especially considering like I was just posting them every week. So I really appreciate your guys' feedback there and your context. I think that it really aligns with how I was feeling. So thank you.
I would just note if you're a listener and you maybe feel like, what are they supposed to get at? Like, maybe that's a little hard because you might not be at that certain point when we're talking about. But the thing I noticed about all three of us is we all said when we didn't have the dialogue where we couldn't answer the question of what we were thinking in the game, which is basically what I said, but in like a weird Mason way.
No. It downgrades you from like Oasis to Game Cave. And so like, thus you must speak at that level.
Game Cave hasn't got my order wrong.
Oh!
I love Oasis, but they did do me dirty on the recent one. But then they sent me a free Deathrite Shaman with the newest one. So it's kind of balancing out a little bit. Anyways, what I was going to say is, if you're trying to work on something you improve as well, and you're listening, if you're not essentially coaching yourself through the entire game you're playing, I would highly suggest doing that. And that's basically like talking about what the reasoning is and why you're making the plays you're making. It is very helpful. We spent 30 minutes on always improving. Let's move on to the Patreon notes. The show will always be free, but if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/ccmtg. You have benefits like asking a Patreon question, which we'll get to at the end of the show. But first, we're going to need a little housekeeping. Spencer, what do we got to take care of?
If you're watching now, it's kind of awkward because, like, I assume that the show would get less live views because I posted the previous episode, like, I don't know, like less than an hour before we went live. We're doing the show live. One of the pieces of feedback we got is that when we switched to editors, the show went from going up on either Wednesday or Tuesday to Thursdays, right? And then this week, because of some issues, it went up on Monday. Well, we've solved that problem. If you want the show as early as possible, if you are a patron of $5 or more, you have access to this show live. And it will be available in the VOD in the Patreon every week. So, if you want the earliest access to the show, patron of $5 or more.
For what source, we record Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern. So you could have it then,
or whenever it is before the show goes live. Yeah. What else does this mean? I mean, early access. It also means that if we don't have a Patreon question for that week, you can be the one to ask it. It also means, as something that has been requested a lot of times from our patrons, but it was always kind of weird to do, is Q&A episodes. If we get enough people that want to jump into the chat and just do it, and I don't care how many questions you want to ask, I know we have at least 3 patrons that would jump at the chance to just have their questions answered for 45 minutes. That's enough to me. So, like, that is a future option due to the new format. What does this mean? It means the mic checks are going away. We did them today. I adjusted audio before we went live. Those things will continue to happen. If you are enjoying those segments, we had quite a few patrons that were watching those every week and giving comments on them. But, like, that will just take place during the live shows. If you weren't watching today, we did those and then switched to this recording. And that will kind of be the format. I just want to say thank you to Mason and Abe because this was a change I wanted to make that I believed improved like what we were providing to the listener. And I already see the benefit just from us having this conversation.
And, sometimes the Q&A, like the questions one have, might be covered during the mic check or whatever too. So we've definitely talked about stuff that ends up not ending up in the show just for whatever reason. Sometimes we get too many questions. But enough of that. Time to get down to the meat and potatoes. It's Explorer time. So I mentioned at the top of the show, but there's a brand new format coming to Arena. It's called Explorer. What is it? Well, it's Pioneer Light. So basically, Wizards heard us and they're like, hey, we want to get Pioneer on Arena. That's the goal. It's going to take us a year or two to get all the cards that matter on Arena, which is another thing we should mention real quick is they've basically confirmed not every card from Pioneer is going to end up on Arena. Really, the cards that are showing play are going to end up there. So don't expect, some weird deck that needs every 2/2 in Magic to ever show up. It's just not going to get made there. But they're going to slowly be adding cards more and more. And they mentioned that the Historic Anthology that comes out this early summer, it's going to have a lot of cards for Pioneer in it as well. And owning those cards in Arena are going to have it there. So it's going to just be Pioneer with what's legal on Arena, with the goal of catching it up as soon as possible. Those cards that are missing, we're going to talk about here later in the show. So if you're curious, don't worry, we're going to get to that soon. Basically, that's all this format is. It follows the same ban list for right now. It's going to just follow the same path, and it's just going to be the bridge from Pioneer in paper to Arena, and eventually they will connect, and the Explorer format will just be Pioneer. And that will be that when it comes to things. Along those same lines, when it comes to the Explorer format, the cards do not change on Arena. So I mentioned how they're in Historic or whatever. It is not like Alchemy. So the card gets, like, for example, let's say when Noda got changed in Alchemy, and so now she hits 4 cards instead of 6. That will not affect Explorer. Explorer cards are just like paper cards. Their text is sacred. It will not change. So that's the big picture. But what does this mean for Arena?
I have a lot of thoughts on what you just said, and I don't really know where to start here. The first thing that I have to say, I did a lot of research for this episode, and I didn't see where they said what you just said, which is that they don't plan to release every card in Pioneer on Arena.
They said it in the announcement.
So was that on the live show, or was that on
in the article? They even used the example I used, where they said we're not going to make every 2/2. We're going to try and get cards with effects, basically.
That's fair. That piece is fair. I do have a problem with that idea. I already had a problem with their model, and I'll just say it at the beginning of the show. I am like the king of talking crap on MTGO. If you've listened to the show for years, you know I didn't like it. I thought it was like, as somebody who made software, I thought it was terrible. When I played Arena for the first time, I was like, this is the future of Magic. If you're not on it, you're an idiot. And I was right for a couple of years. I have a pretty big problem with the idea that you can't simply release flashback draft formats of these cards. For context, that is literally what the master sets were on MTGO for years. It is a little different, right? Because they were only... Eventually, it's what it became, right? I don't understand why Arena can't do that. And I think that it's appalling that they won't do it. That they are focused too much on these Arena-only formats, so they won't give us this product that we clearly all want.
I think the main problem is stuff like Time to Feed, where it weirdly just doesn't work on Arena. When Jumpstart came to Arena... And like, I'm not saying this to use, I'm saying this like in the verbal, like people who like think about it. Do you think Time to Feed was banned because it was too strong, or because it didn't work on the client? And
that card is a bunch of weird words.
So. Yeah, that card's like a weird example, but I'm curious if that's the main hurdle of stuff.
No, I think
I'm sure they would love to do Khans of Tarkir drafts, and
I think this is a good talking point for this part of the podcast. So I'm just going to read it, and if you, the editor, if you want to put it on the show, Time to Feed is 2 and a green for a sorcery. Choose target creature an opponent controls. When that creature dies this turn, you gain 3 life. Target creature you control fights that creature. I work in software. I do not see how this card would be hard to code. Like,
do you know how hard this card is to understand in Magic? Dubiously so?
So if we look on there are exactly 3, all of them being the week that it was printed, rulings for this card. So there are a couple things. One, I assume that this has to do with how it targets your thing versus their thing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that it's not just a straight fight targeting, but also like the part where if it's broken up and their creature dies this turn, you still gain 3 life.
So I assume that this worked the way that like this might be too old for Mason, but like Arc Trail worked, right, in Standard?
I know Arc Trail.
Oh, good job, Mason. You're way more boomer than we give you credit for. No, I assume this was like an Arc Trail problem, right? If there's one thing that I've learned of being a product manager in software, I don't want to go too deep into this, by the way, so this will be the last thing I say on it, is that everything is possible in software. It is about the amount of resources that you want to put into it. And my problem is they put a lot of resources into a bunch of crap we didn't care about for 2 years. And so it's like, all right, we don't care about that. You're not making money off of it. And your response is, we won't give you the thing that you want, but we're making some money from this, so we'll keep doing it. And I'm not okay with it.
Yeah, I don't have any amount of expertise about software and stuff, but I could imagine that, like, if I were to give the benefits out to Wizards here as to why they wouldn't just put all the cards out, I think that there's some amount probably of concern about memory bloatage of having all the cards present in all their different versions, which I think is a long-term issue that Magic Arena will have at some point, is the card database size.
Hold on, why doesn't Hearthstone have that problem then? Hearthstone is older than Arena. I can tell you why, for what it's worth. It's because all the files are text files rather than like coding files when you upload the game.
I think it's probably just an engine issue for a bunch of the cards that are that they're worried about or whatever, if there are any. I think that I'm not going to lose any sleep over not being able to play Blade of the Sixth Bride or whatever.
I think it depends, right? Like the second that a card hits Pioneer that is not in this format, we will care. But if that doesn't happen, then we won't care, right? Like it'll just be great.
Yeah, and I also think that if it does happen, they probably have the capability to just find a fix to insert the card into the client.
Yeah, like if Time Defeat was the linchpin, for example, of Pioneer, I'm sure it would either get banned or it would get, it would get solved. You know what I mean? It just a thing that they could add. Given the problem, my guess is that the budget's kind of small, and they gotta do what they gotta do with their Hasbro $1 billion company. Anyways, doesn't matter. We're moving on. We all agree that anything is possible. Software with enough money.
I have a question for you two before we move on to like decks though. What does this format entering the ecosystem mean for competitive Magic on Arena?
This is the fourth quadrant of their 4-quadrant constructed format approach to having constructed Magic on Arena. I love seeing Spencer laugh really hard at that, but it's just the truth. Where they have an Alchemy Arena only standard format, a historic Arena only constructed non-rotating format. Now they have a paper mirroring format in standard and a paper mirroring format they're working towards through this format, through Explorer to Pioneer. And it is a part now of the digital paths to the Pro Tour through Arena. And that means it is just as much a big deal as standard, Alchemy, and historic. At the very least, on top of having this implication that's also bringing up Pioneer even further than it has been. I don't know if you'd add anything else to that.
It matters as soon as it matters for a qualifier season, the way I think all the arena formats matter. Like, no one really cares about the arena formats until the qualifier happens for them in a lot of ways. I mean, people obviously care, but when it comes to like competitive Magic and like the focus and everything, it's just another thing to have your focus on. And luckily, this format overlaps so much with standard and historic originally that I think onboarding for it will be pretty easy wildcard wise for a lot of players, assuming you've already kept up with that. And so I think it's going to just be like Abe said, it's a part of competitive Magic. It's just as important as the other things when its time comes in the sun. And it's another way for people who love Arena to have another new format to play and kind of cycle through. We play standard for the first 2 weeks. Then I play a little Alchemy when the new thing drops. Then I play a little historic. Then I play a little Pioneer. I'm back to standard, and like you get to do your whole little thing about.
I think that I'm pretty close to Mason on this, other than the fact that I don't think anybody plays Alchemy. I think it's an unplayable dead format that only is played because of the Pro Tour. But I do think that what's really interesting, because we recorded our Pick 2 set review, and then the next day announcement dropped, and then 2 days later another announcement dropped. There's a lot happening on this podcast that I want to cover for this, which is that Arena is turning a lot closer into MTGO when you think about competitive play, as far as events becoming more closely aligned with a thing that you can do as a competitive player on Arena rather than just ladder. And for me, as somebody who is going to be both an Arena player, an MTGO player, and a paper player, this format is pretty important to me because I will probably play some amount of events for this to get me the equivalent of basically QPs. We'll put the article in the show notes that kind of explains this to help me qualify, because I am not interested in ladder play, and thus this format is an option for me to participate in the competitive landscape of Magic that doesn't have to be Arena only, and that can be part of my suite of things.
Real quick, I'm going to give you the rundown, listener, if you haven't heard, just so you can understand everything Spencer said there. The new announcement's basically this. When it comes to the big qualifier weekends before you be top 1,200, what's going to happen now is top 250 get an auto invite, and then 251 to 1,200 get points. You use points to enter what you would have done before and what the top 250 get. So I believe it was 25 points, and you get some number of that from the 250 to 1,200, but you also get 4 points for every 5-0 in events. And I think I want to say 2 points for 4 winning, but essentially if you do that, you will then qualify, be able to do it. So you no longer have to participate with ladder, which is basically what I'm getting to. If you have had a problem with Arena and ladder, which I think is a thing a lot of people have had problems with. I, for one, never push for top 1200. It's never worth my time. You can now play these events, and the events will give you gold and gems. They cost gold and gems to enter, to be fair, but they will give you gold and gems and these points. And so it's a way to actually, like, much like how draft players get stock accounts, in theory, you can stock your account up a little bit with this.
Yeah,
not quite as much as draft, but a good amount.
It's a way to free roll constructed too, which is already a problem with the arena economy. And I'll just add on to what Mason just said, because I think that it's important to call out that you can do this, but also the price is increasing. So like the price of events is going to increase, but the prize support is going to increase as well, to both accommodate for the fact that you can now free roll your account with these, as well as what's even crazier for what it's worth, because I think I obviously have been talking poorly on Wizards of the Coast on this podcast, but what was it? A month ago, they did their economy announcement where they announced changing the cards they were going to give out in events. And then they immediately were like, actually, we're just going to change events after the negative feedback too. We're going to let you free roll your account in Constructed, just like we do in Limited. And also, that will be a path to qualification, as will Limited moving forward. So, like, kudos to them. Like, they definitely listened after that announcement where people basically accused them of not listening, so good for them.
I thought it was that you got play-in points that you used to play a play-in event.
That is correct. But that is it's not like you auto-qualify for top 250. You get the play-in event qualification.
Yeah, so the play-in event, Abe, is the new thing that was the arena qualifier. And then you basically have to do that to then play the actual thing. Does that make sense? So it's like basically PPTQ for the points, RPTQ Pro Tour.
Because there's now an arena
top 250. Do I skip the play-in event?
No, because there's now. So no, it doesn't suck. There's a reason it doesn't suck. Hold on, it's because there's now an arena championship, which there was not before.
Also, you can play that event as many times as you have buy-in.
Yes, that is true
so
too.
So in theory, so getting 250 is like basically saving yourself like 12 hours of grinding at like an 80% clip.
Right. So
in theory, you could have 3 shots on a weekend pretty easily if you played only arena.
And the thing is like the same thing is true of events. If you're just like an event grinder, right, and you like stock up enough event points, it's the same thing. And also, there's now like just like the MTGO championship, there's now an arena equivalent of that. Sorry, we went really deep on the other announcement here, Mason. What decks do we just know are going to be there?
We have it listed a little differently, but I think it's probably important to talk about the missing key cards in Pioneer and then go over the decks that aren't really super effective. We'll go through it more. So I'm going to read these off a little slowly and clearly. If you don't know, I highly suggest stopping and looking them up. But for the most part, you should know them. We have Hidden Strings, Days Undoing, Fiery Impulse, which is a bolt, JVP, Thespian Stage, Elvish Mystic, Pour Over the Pages, Behold the Beyond, Pain Lands, Deathrite Shaman, Monastery Swiftspear, Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, Idle on the Great Revel, Thing in the Ice, Collective Defiance, Supreme Verdict, Dread Boar, Liliana the Last Hope, Mana Confluence, basically all of BFZ except for Ulamog, Kalidas, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, Voice of Resurgence, and Mutavault. Those cards are not in Explore that are big players in Pioneer. So if I listed a card there, it is not on Arena.
I think that's 22 cards plus lands and Eldrazi, right? Like, are they missing? And that's it.
Nissa and Gideon are the 2 big ones that are missing. But yes, there's no Gideon ally of Zendikar.
Oh, sure. But those are not listed. That's fair. So it's 24 cards plus lands, which is all the lands missing, right? And
the Pain lands actually aren't played anymore. So it's like
they saw play this week on MTGO for what it's worth.
Yeah,
a few of them.
Occasional play.
Yeah.
But they're pretty
the blue-green one and the blue-red one specifically see play. I think the rest of them do not. That's so much less than a set worth of cards.
Yeah, also, if you're thinking about the format, think about normally an anthology adds about 25 cards. So if we think the anthology will add 12 cards that are impactful to Pioneer, we'll have the format when it comes to big player cards currently.
6 months.
Probably by this time. Probably this time next year. Because they do an anthology every 6 months.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought that they were along with set reviews. That makes sense.
So the two big decks are Blue-White Control and Winota. These are the top playing decks that have almost no changes. Blue-White Control is missing Supreme Verdict and like Fringe Cyborg cards on occasion, but not even. So they're missing Supreme Verdict. And then Winota is missing Elvish Mystic, but it has Gilded Goose that you can replace it with. And it's missing Voice of Resurgence, like we mentioned in the list. So this is the starting place. These are two of the decks that are pretty big when it comes to having cards missing. But for the sake of the conversation, let's start with Winota, because I think proactive decks are typically really good at filling in the things they're replacing with. And I've played the As Written event on Arena a good bit, which was essentially this exact format with a different name. They kind of beta tested it to see if people liked it. And the Winota deck was very, very good. Even with just Gilded Gooses, like your deck was still really strong. And Voice of Resurgence is not make or break. It's just a really good sticky threat. And it's funny, part of the reason it's so good is it's good against Supreme Verdict. So having Supreme Verdict gone, there will be other rafts that take its place, but it is not like a do or die situation.
Yeah, really quickly, while Supreme Verdict is missing, Wrath of God is not legal in Pioneer, right? So but they do have Day of Judgment that is.
Yeah, they have like Shatter the Sky.
Is Day of Judgment also not legal?
Day of Judgment's not legal. No, you have.
I definitely misunderstood the show notes then, and also said this wrong in the Discord. Said patrons, I'm sorry. I just assumed it was legal.
No, it hasn't been printed in since Standard in the Pioneer times, because it's not in Pioneer either. It's in
right. That would make sense.
Historic. Yeah.
That's weird. That's weird that they gave us 2 4-mana wraths in Historic that were not Supreme Verdict.
But we still have 4. We still have 2 of them. Sorry, 4-mana wraths.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I do think that both. I think Shatter the Sky is the one that cares about power. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that one's probably pretty good in that format.
The other one is the multicolor one that just came out.
Correct.
Yeah, is that the black-white one though?
No, that one's white. There's also the Caius Wrath, which I believe you're thinking of.
That one's mana cost.
No, Caius Wrath is black, white, kill everything.
Oh, that's right.
But there's one in Streets of New Capenna that's just like if you have a multicolor creature, draw a card.
Sure. I think there are a lot of replacements in blue-white. One of the I had noted a few replacements myself for the missing elf. I think that depending on the deck, like the early mono green decks, for example, played a special sloth instead of a elf. I think Gilded Goose fits really well into things like Winota. So I think there are a lot of replacements specifically in those decks that are pretty great. And I think that Winota is actually like a great level 0 for both Pioneer and this format. And I think it's a really great place to start.
Yeah, that is the deck where, like, if all you wanted to know was what should I craft on this Thursday, probably today, the time you're hearing this, the answer is Winota from me. That deck will get you a long way, even if people adapt. It is very, very strong. There's also things like Jasper Sentinel that the deck could play. So there are a lot of different one-drop slots, and we're seeing in Pioneer where some players are moving to 6 elves and having 2 more lands. Just because hitting your land drops and actually casting your other spells is so good, and you don't have to cheat Winota to have it be strong, and you're better through spot removal. And so if that trend keeps up, having only 2 Gilded Goose hurts even less. Huge stuff there for Winota. Some other decks that are pretty strong that have not missing very much is Rakdos Sacrifice and Jund Sacrifice. Rakdos just doesn't have some legal sideboard cards for the most part, but it still has all of its main players in its main deck. And
I think it's just Kolaghan's Command for what it's worth.
Kolaghan's Command's on Arena.
Oh, well then I don't know what it is then. I wrote the show notes and I thought that was not true.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, it was an anthology. And so, anthologies, they're great. But Jund Sacrifice is also missing a couple sideboard cards. They're all kind of fringy stuff, and this is something to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about this. All of those cards missing do have big implications. Like, we're missing basically everything that makes Lotus Field combo broken, so we don't have that pressure on the format. So with Lotus Field not part of the format, things like Blue-White get stronger. Other grinding nonsense decks like Jund Sacrifice get a lot stronger. Another thing that's pretty big is Thing in the Ice is gone. Thing in the Ice is doing a huge job right now of making the blue-red controlling and Arclight decks actually able to stop Winota and things like that in Pioneer, and is a crux of the format. So having pieces like that missing make things like Jund and Rakdos Sacrifice a little bit more appealing, where typically there are some cards that are inhibiting them from succeeding. those are not part of the format currently. And things like hidden strings basically being like lol Corvald, like what are you doing? You're dead, are now like not pressures in the format. But we see like Jund Sacrifice is only really missing the elves from the Citadel build, which is only for grindier formats anyways. So if that is the case, there's probably replacements you can do, like we talked about with Winota. But that deck's basically there if you want to play the grindy version of it with Corvault. So those are two really big things. Do y'all have any thoughts on those decks in the kind of the Explorer context, thinking about everything that's kind of missing?
Yeah, I have thoughts on a few cards that I'll mention. That I want to mention the ones that I don't think that have replacements. And I'll just kind of skip over like the hidden strings decks. I think that you just don't have replacements for that deck. The next ones that I'll just mention really quickly is I don't know what the mono red decks look like in this format. The reason is there's pretty much two really important cards. Monastery Suspire and Eidolon both missing. Whether you are playing the aggressive version or the burn version of mono red in Pioneer, this was missing. And even if you're playing Mason's like blue red version, you are still missing Monastery Suspire. Like, the red aggressive deck is actually hurt a lot. The other thing is I think it's the blue red control deck is missing Treasure Shoes, Dig Through Time, Collective Defiance, Days Undoing. Thank you. That one is, as a control deck, is also missing a lot. And then the pressure cards on the format being the ones that I would really talk about are Hidden Strings and
Thing in the Ice.
Thing in the Ice. Thank you. That is actually the one I was thinking of. I think those are like huge. If you were paying attention this weekend, do either of you know what won one of the challenges this weekend?
Well, Mono Green Devotion is.
Mono Green Devotion did win one of the challenges this weekend, and I think that those are two of its very bad matchups. Specifically, those two decks.
The blue-red control deck's actually a little bit of a buy for you. Really, yeah, because thanks to Nykthos, which is a big card mixing from that.
Yeah, that's true.
But that card's quite good, actually, because of it's actually hard for the Thing in the Ice deck. Because it can't answer the mix of creatures plus planeswalkers really easily,
sure,
the planeswalkers end up sticking around, and the planeswalkers are really good at redeploying the hand.
I love that.
And Nissa are really good at that. So that is
but Kiora disappears when you don't have Nykthos, right? So this is,
I would imagine so.
Yeah,
but it is weirdly good in other spots. I don't know. It might not be enough though.
No, that's totally fair. So like one of the things that happens when you lose Nykthos, right, is like you probably play more Castle Ehrenbrig, or Castle, is it Ehrenbrig? Is that the name of the card?
Ehrenbrig.
Yeah. So like that happens, but I don't know that that's like enough. And one of the reasons is because one of the really cool discoveries in Pioneer for Mono Green Devotion is actually the power of Storm the Festival and how that can be your late game card instead of literally anything else. Like, I can't imagine a better card for like a mono green ramp deck. And I'm literally a guy that plays like a lot of, ramp decks. I think that deck gets a huge boon from a decrease in a deck that I don't think that it can beat in the Hidden Strings deck. Like, and I think that you see that when you look at like, I don't think that the adoption of Karn is not for nothing, right? It is literally to give you some amount of percentage points against this deck.
And for what it's worth, you can still infinite combo with Karn in this format. It's just harder without Nykthos, which is a
wait. How can you do it without Nykthos?
There's some card that's a devotion creature. It's like Nykthos on a creature.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that card's playable though.
Well, also there's an artifact too that does the same thing. It's
Nyx Lotus also does it.
There's Nyx Lotus and there's another one that's great.
Lotus actually might be a sick inclusion now that you've said this.
Yeah, because that works with Kiora as well. So this is funny because I was going to ask you because I think the green deck, its late game is basically the same except it needs to figure out how to replace Nyx. But there's cards to replace Nyx.
Yeah,
but its early game I think is actually quite different. Or Old Growth Troll.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One, Old Growth Troll is, I think the only reason you're playing that card is because of Nykthos. I actually think that replacing that mostly with lands is fine. And then once
Topiary Spawner. That's what I was thinking of. The 4/4.
Sure. Oh, you might be better than what I'm doing, Mason. But what I was going to say is that even if you were going to do what you just said, I do think that our good old friend Arboreal Grazer makes a lot more sense in this deck. I also don't know that you need to be monocolored. we don't actually have either the Eldrazi or Dragon Lord Atarka to like force us into 7 mana threats. They're thinking of Worldbreaker and Dragon Lord Atarka, but I would assume we could find a second color threat or a mono green threat in 7 mana to make us care about the card you just said, right? The
Topiary Stomper?
Yeah, the Stomper. I do think that 7 mana threats is where you want to focus if you're not going to go the route of Storm the Festival as a 4-of. But I also think that like the current mono green decks are already just playing 2 Nissas. We're going really deep on a deck that, like, while it did just win the challenge, has been a fringe deck for about a month and a half, right?
I think it's the second or third best deck in Pioneer.
I think that it is a top 5 deck pretty easily, but mostly because I think that blue decks have dominated this format due to an uninterrupted love of the blue-red sorcery.
Expressive Iteration?
Yeah, expressive iteration.
The Delve spells are just so good.
That's true too. Both of them, right? Like
we didn't mention it, but Temporal Trespass is also not in the format. That should have been on the list. That card is messed up in Pioneer.
I did look at this, and there is a total of 1 deck playing this card, and it's a 1-of.
It's a 3-of an Arclight Phoenix.
I looked at Arclight Phoenix specifically. I could not find an Arclight Phoenix list that did better in a challenge specifically that was not playing more than 1.
Well, so 9th place in the Pioneer Challenge is
I did not, for what it's worth, I'm not looking at this weekend.
So Phoenix has been on a bit of a downswing for weird reasons, but the Phoenix decks often play 2 to 3 of this card. And I can explain why in just 1 second. But just this past weekend, if you didn't see, Ethan Gajowski's back from the past. He played 3, and then we saw a friend of the show, Barbosa, get 9th place in the challenge the next day, playing the exact same list, playing 3. And basically, the idea behind that is that's actually a way to beat the mono green deck. Is you can Galvanic plus that with Thing in the Ice, and then with your Hall of the Storm Giants, you can often kill them in time. And you kind of play like a janky blue-red control deck. You unsummon the creatures. It's not a problem that they can redeploy them because they're dead before they can redeploy them. So that card is actually, while it is only played in Arclight Phoenix, it is a really big part of the current configuration of Arclight Phoenix in combination with Thing in the Ice.
We should mention that the 5-color Niv deck is actually substantially different in Pioneer than it is in Historic too.
I want to say one thing before we go off monitoring for its worth. The Castle Gambrick idea I think is very interesting, especially when you consider Vorinclex with all the threats we talked about.
I thought about that.
Play off Castle Gambrick.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty big break point if you go away from the festivals. Anyways,
the problem, I just want to really quickly, because I've thought a lot about this. You do lose I guess you don't lose it, but like Cavalier specifically plus the Storm is actually a pretty big get.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to play a Storm build without Nykthos. I think that one of the biggest things about Storm to me was the ability to put a bunch of Devotion in play at once, like a Nissa and a Cavalier, and like have Cavalier hit Nykthos, and then plus your Nissa, and then flash back again, like the explosive draws. I think you're really missing, and you're also missing like 4 of your turn 1 mana dorks. I think that a lot of these decks are really different than Pioneer.
I don't think that's true because I don't think that turn 2 Kiora is important in these decks. So I think that
respectfully disagree.
I just don't think
Kiora sets you up for turn 3 Nissa.
No matter what you did to ramp you that turn on turn 2 would do that for Nissa. And also,
it's not about
these decks are only playing 2 Nissas. I have already increased Nissas because I think this becomes more important to Mason's point, but I don't think that Kiora was the linchpin for that. Any ramp spell on turn 2 will do that. Literally, if you have, whether it's Elf or Grazer, you will get to turn 3 Nissa.
Well, Grazer requires a bit more work than Elf. That's the big problem.
Well, I'm not convinced that it's mono green. I think that it is possible.
Yeah, I think that you might have to take the deck in another direction.
Yeah,
is how I feel. Yeah. I think that like there's enough missing there that you're no longer incentivized to play so many just mono green spells. But some version of a ramping Storm the Festival deck that plays these things and doesn't rely so much on the Nykthos stuff, I think is good. Or just Ugin still in the format. There's tons of really powerful things to be ramping to, and tons of tools to ramp there. I think that we're
also missing Oath and Nissa. So like the devotion.
Yeah, I noticed that on. I mean, The Oathedness is a lot more important on the devotion side for what it's worth, where it's like an early turn that's grabbing you your ramp creatures.
Sure. For the people watching live, since Spencer's making it sound like we have some, I want to talk more about this green deck, Gabe. Because this is where I'm at. I'm with you. The turn 1 elf being gone, I think is a problem. I think Slothers can go a distance, but I think if we're Slothin, we're looking like a different deck. I just want to see if we can do the devotion thingy still. That's all I can.
Oh, yeah, if you can like have a Nyx Lotus set up.
Yeah, Nyx Lotus, or it's the Pantheon. There's a card that's like, it's a mana rock, and then it's a mana rock for 3 mana to be Nykthos. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm going to find it.
3 mana to be Nykthos. The only mana rock I can remember that's a blank of the Pantheon is Altar of the Pantheon that adds 1 pip to your devotion of every color and taps 4 mana of any color from there.
Maybe I got that card screwed up in my head with Nyx Lotus. I thought that card did that. Okay.
It's just the 3 mana Manolith that gives you a pip of devotion for everything.
I think you're right. Now we're talking about it, because I thought that card would work with Kiora in that 3 slot.
Yeah, no.
Which is why I wanted the elf so badly too.
You know, there's something to be said for like a mono green like beats deck, but it is really, really difficult going down. Like the biggest draw I think to mono green, and I've always kind of felt this way about Pioneer in general, has been that there are X amount of draws to each color that are the cheapest spells you can play that interact well. And it's like why black is so good is because like Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, and was like so good for a while is that. And then like why blue red is so good is because you get to play all the card selection and treasure crew, like you get to play the cheapest spells, and then the red removal spells naturally answer the best threats that you can play for 1 mana, which are just the mana dorks. And so when you lose out on the ability to play 8, I get a little worried about what your deck's power level becomes. But if the whole format is a lot more fair, which it might be,
I think it'll be fair decks with a lot of interaction. So I think our ramp.
Yeah, like I think if you're a deck that can ramp to Ugin, then it doesn't matter how many Torval's Huntmasters wind up hitting play if you're going to Ugin the turn after. If you can Ugin by 5 against a deck that's not interacting with you, like out of Winota, then you're in a good spot. And the red decks are slower too, but like right now in Pioneer, it kind of feels like the incentives are around either playing something that doesn't care about the cheap spells at all because it invalidates them with more expensive cards, like the control game plan, like you just avoid people getting under you, and then you like Wandering Emperor them after verdicting them or whatever, and then you sit behind your stuff and you win. And even then the aggro decks can be kind of tough. Or you're playing...
Elder Gargaroth's a threat too.
Yeah, or you're playing green because you want to punish the decks that don't have the access to the cheap answers to elves, and you also want to, and then you have a threat package that does that, and you can also race the Winota deck in setting up your game plan because you have all that mana production. Without all of the pieces of that, I think the dynamics are like even more different than I can predict. But I think that like if you look at the shell there,
I think not having 8 elves is actually a huge disadvantage in the Winota matchup, where you're actually good against Winota with 8 elves, whereas I think that...
Yeah, I think with 8 elves and Nykthos...
exactly.
You have a chance.
You're like...
You can drag race on what you're trying to do.
Yep.
But I think that you lose a lot of that power. I was just saying how, like, I think that some of these missing 1 mana spells really change things. But I think that if you built a green list to... Like
7 lands.
A world where actually you're a Grazer, Kiora... Lotus Bloom deck that plays a high land count with Tangled Florahedrons, and then you power out Ugin as your hammer, as well as being a Karn deck, instead of focusing on the devotion thing, where you're just trying to get a fast land count out of Grazer, and you'd also play the Azusa extra land drop card.
I won about like $2,000 to $3,000 in early Pioneer. Oh, well, we can go back to the show after I talk about this, but just playing this deck in different iterations. And one of the things that I did was I played a Grazer version that was focused on getting to 7 lands for Temple of the False God or whatever to get you as well as
the knockoff one,
the Eldrazi lands, to get you to the Eldrazi mana, and then it was like a World Breaker Dragon Lord Atarka deck. I think that is actually the right direction for this deck to go in this format, because of the card that Mason mentioned, the Stomper,
The big problem is we just don't have any of those.
You only have one, right? You only have Castle. It has to be a Castle Grazer Stomper deck, right? Like
Well,
you.
I'm saying you could go
there has to be a
the
creature,
Lotus
too.
Field. The Lotus Field.
No, I agree. I'm saying that you don't get to be a Storm in the Festival deck anymore.
Because Ugin's your threat.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, no, it needs to be a creature because you are.
I would just say play Ugin. And
No, I did-
you can play creatures.
I
Like,
think-
I think Ugin is enough of a hammer.
I think you won't be able to keep up with Winota because they just get to play Goose, right? Like they get Goose and you don't.
You could also be an Hour of Promise deck.
Well, don't
My thought is they're gonna be like
don't butter me
Black
up
Green
like that,
Lantern.
Abe.
I just don't think we can beat Winota.
Yeah, I agree with Mason, but now I'm questioning my whole life because of Abe's Hour of Promise comment, and like it's like one of my favorite cards. That's Primeval Titan. You want
I
me to
think,
put?
I think if you go Elf into Stomper into Hour into Ugin, you can probably win. And that,
I
that way you get to
don't
7 lands
want
with the-
I don't
with
want
the-
this hope that you're giving me right now,
you don't
and
want
we
the-
need to move on with the episode.
Maybe that got kept in. Who knows? We had a whole thing about green. Other decks that are pretty much the same before we move on to everything else is there's Arnu Greasefang and Mono Blue Spirits. These decks are seemingly 75 card copies to Arena.
Dude, spirits, like if you have $80 in your pocket right now, you can just buy this in paper. This could just be your deck this next season. I think this is a great buy. This deck costs, I think it's $85 according to Goldfish. I'm sure that you can talk if you're buying the whole deck from your local game store, I'm sure you could talk them down to 80. I think it's a great buy, and I also think that because the deck we've talked about, right? We've talked about Winota, that gets disrupted by this deck. We talked about blue white, that's going to have some problems with some versions of how you play this deck. We talked about mono green, right? That's going to have some number of problems. While the Rakdos and Jund decks probably have a pretty good matchup here, I think that you're 60% against the top 5. I think it's a great buy.
I think all the monocolor decks, especially this one, is like really positioned to prey on a metagame that is more mid-rangey in nature and takes advantage of the loss of Supreme Verdict really well out of the blue-white deck, where that's like one of the places that it actually matters is these blue-based creature decks where you don't have to rely on like Collect Company into a spell queller or something, which is another card that I think is missing from the format. You are just a sleek mono blue tempo deck with Faceless Havens. You get to play kind of at instant speed. And this is definitely a deck that I could see like punishing a number of people who are just playing the same stuff. You have to draw Shacklegeist if you want to have any chance against Winota, I think. That matchup is probably tough, but it's not that long ago that like mono blue Curious Obsession decks were like one of the most played things you play against on ladder playing standard, and this is just that with all of the greatest hits, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like this version, Mason, I would love your opinion on this because I think that you've played more of these styles of decks than me. Would need to play more Brazen Borrower than they're currently playing in Pioneer to like combat probably the increase in Winota that ends up happening. What are your thoughts, Mason?
You probably want to have more of those and things like Spell Pierce or whatever, because you really want Spell Pierce for things like Lotus Field, actually. Like, they're good against the control deck, don't get me wrong, but your Geist Snares or Gaslight Snares, whatever it's called, the new Mana Leak is also pretty good against them. There are like other spirits you can play that maybe you want to play in different spots. Like the Spectral Adversary is very good at blanking removal, but there's like less some of the good removal, like Fiery Impulse. We still have things like Lightning Axe and Flame Blast Bolt, but Fiery Impulse kills your Lord. So I can see that becoming a Brazen Borrower. The one Icon of Ancestry has actually been very good for me every time I played this deck and played against it. So I think you can kind of switch things around a little bit, and then that way you can kind of go the distance. But yeah, there's actually like a surprising number of tools. Like the list we have linked here doesn't even have Aether Gust. So you can play things like Aether Gust in order to help combat and switch things. I think that'll be a big part of Explorers. Like the first day, we're going to see a lot of sideboards that look like the Pioneer counterparts. But sideboards are built for the metagame. The metagame is different, so we have to figure things out. And I think things like Fry, we're going to see way more of, because we see a lot of Rending Vollering to answer Winota. I think Fry is just the new thing. Answers Winota, answers Teferi. That's just like a Narset, big parts of the format I expect to be. I think you can do stuff like that. And there's just a lot of different little spirits you can play that matter. So
one of the really cool things about this deck, I think, that it does get to play Faithless Haven, which is just not true of a lot of the decks in this format. Like, I don't think mono white, mono red, maybe I don't even know that mono black wants it, even though mono black might be able to be a thing in this format. Like,
Yeah, I was going to say.
It is the one that gets to play this card, which is a pretty big deal. I would say the other thing is, Mason, you mentioned Snare, but like that's another pressure on the format card that this deck gets to play that no other deck gets to play. The only caveat that I would give actually has to do with Faithless Haven, which is I don't know that once the masses get their hands on the format with the new set, that it doesn't become blue-white Delver deck. But the thing is that Spirits has been so good historically that I think that it pushes Delver out. I would love your thoughts, Abe.
One of the things that struck me most about it is that it's the only deck playing Faceless Haven, and that probably one of the most striking losses to me out of the mono-colored aggressive decks is Mutavault to the format compared to Pioneer. Like, a deck that I played a lot before the pressure of the format kind of aged it out was the mono black aggro deck, and people have tried other builds with like the new mono black vehicle, Makai Soul Ripper, basically a deck full of the recursive 2/1s for a black, like cheap threats, like Scrapheap Scrounger that are really recursive, some number of Murderous Rider, maybe Rankle as your top end, and Mutavault and Castle Lochthwain as your non-basic lands, basically. Like that shell in that deck is still very present, I think, in the format. Really able to thrive, I think, where it can't thrive currently in Pioneer. There's a good amount of decks that maybe, if you were someone who remembers Pioneer before COVID and before the format has kind of undergone all this pressure on Magic Online and been out of the spotlight, that there are those decks that have the chops and have the easiest things to replace. Like, there's a huge amount of recursive 2/1s for a single black that are out there.
Speaking of 2/1s, Rattle Chains is not in Explore. Which is
I did not realize that when we put this in the show notes, for what it's worth. I just assumed that it was. That's a pretty big loss.
Sorry, there it is. No, sorry. We're good. Sorry.
Okay.
It is here. I went on Arena and searched, and it did not pop up.
You didn't have them in your collection, Mason. You didn't have them.
No, actually, I have 3 of them right here. I'm ready to go.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about then. I do want to talk about what you just said. Sorry. I think that Mono Black is actually a really good example, because monocolored decks in this format are really interesting, right? Like, if we look at the current format, like, I think it's just mono green and mono blue that see play, but it isn't like mono red hasn't seen play in this format. I think that specifically the Devotion red deck saw play early on.
The new red also like red mid-range decks.
Yeah,
and just mono red.
Well, sorry, I meant outside of the mono red aggro and burn deck. I did mean that the 4-mana Devotion Minotaur saw play early on.
Fanatic of Mogus.
Yes, that
guy.
That card specifically, there was a Nykthos version of that deck running around in Pioneer really early on that actually specifically was built to beat the mono green decks that were really successful before. I think there was a banning. One of the cards that we didn't mention, I'm going to mention a couple things really quick. One is Cascading Cataracts is actually not legal on Arena. It is actually missing, and the thing that I would change...
It's in the format. It's not missing. It's been part of Arena the whole time.
Oh, it is part of Arena.
Yeah, that's probably why you're forgetting it.
That is crazy.
It was in the Amonkhet remaster.
It is the number one thing that I would change about the list that won the challenge this weekend. The second thing that I was going to mention about Mono Black, though, we'll get into that, is that Urborg and Mutavault are missing. And also, Urborg doesn't help the Faceless Haven versus Mutavault problem. Even if Urborg came out tomorrow, it wouldn't actually help you with Faceless Haven. It would not solve your problem. And the reason for this is because you don't actually want to play mono swamps in mono black. You want to play a lot of spell lands, a lot of things that are gaining you advantages because you get to play Urborg and nobody else gets to do that. And thus, I think that you have a pretty big deficit here.
Last thing, I figured it out. The spirit that was missing is Mausoleum Wanderer.
I think that's a big one too.
Yeah, it's just on here. I knew something was missing. I thought it was Rattle Change. quadruple check just now. It's not on Arena.
I love the live look-in. I think that I thought that I looked at every card on this deck list, but the other thing that Mono Blue has that the other decks don't have is that Ether Gust and Mystical Dispute are the best monocolor hate cards, right? Like, of the ones that we have, even including the ones that are about to be printed in Streets of New Capenna, those two are so much better than the rest, just by a lot. And thus, it just leads to Mono Blue being better. And until the format gets changed, where the other cards are cared about more, it will continue to be that way. That was what I was going to say about Mono Black Ape.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mono Blue has a much better opportunity to flourish in a format where only there's half as many Llanowar elves, and not all the removal is there, and there's just all of these kind of cards that are linchpins of the format that you think about because they're cheap and effective. And the fewer cheap and effective cards there are in a format, the better these Mono Blue decks get, because they're going to be decks playing slower, longer game plans, trying to accrue more value and play bigger haymakers. And these are your mana lake decks. They're the ones that are, and the Spell Pierce decks that are punishing you for having to spend more mana for your spells. And I definitely think that they're probably the ones that can afford to play a bunch of basic island more so than, like Mono Black probably wants to play Castle Locthwain and some number of the Eye Tyrant, and doesn't want to have a Faceless Haven, 3 swamps, and a Castle Locthwain before it can start attacking with its creature land.
Mason, you are the perpetrator of Greasefang. Is that not correct?
I've never played Greasefang.
I would never perpetrate a Greasefang.
I think the Greasefang deck is bad.
So like, legitimately, I want to talk about this deck because that was my... for some reason, I thought you were a huge fan of it, but I actually share your guys' opinion. Can somebody help me understand, like, this deck's foothold in the format and if it will continue? I don't get it.
It's neat.
Why is it better than the other decks that do the same thing?
There are 2 good things about the Greasefang deck, and there's a third one for Explorer. So the third one from Explorer is all the other decks got worse by a lot, in a lot of ways. Like missing elves, missing early interaction that's good against Greasefang Matters tier, missing, that sort of things, thing in the ice. These are all problems for this deck. Lotus Field's a problem for this deck. There's a lot of problems in Pioneer that this deck doesn't have here. The thing is, it is the best fair combo deck outside of Ramp. So Mono Green Devotion is a combo deck. You can do the whole combo and kill people or whatever. But it's also like a fair deck and kind of overwhelms them or whatever, and you can play those middle lanes. This deck gets to play like the Citrus Supplier, the Blood Engine. You have a Croxo or 2 normally. Some of the builds have adopted the new Sorin, the Vengeful Bloodlord, or I guess it's the old Sorin. That's like bring things back. And you play this kind of grindy game that looks a lot like the Black-Red deck, but you get a combo-y finish with Greasefang. And I think it's appealing to have that sort of like combo mid-range kind of package, like a split.
Will you talk about the combo for the listeners really quick that might not be familiar with Pioneer?
Yeah, sure. So Greasefang, it basically says return a vehicle to the battlefield. Again, begin a combo on your
graveyard to play, and it gets haste.
Yes,
and then you pick it up to your hand at the beginning of the end step.
Correct.
So what are you grabbing?
Parhelion 2, which is that huge 5/5 vehicle for the Spark that makes 2 angels when you attack. So typically they play that and then a Sky Sovereign. Some play a Smuggler's Copter as a way to like meet in the middle. Like there's a lot of different things in between.
No one plays Smuggler's Copter.
Sorry, I said Smuggler's Copter again, didn't I? I meant Heart of Kieran.
No, I actually, for those who have played a lot of Historic like I have, you've actually probably played against this specific thing in Historic. I have definitely lost to this in Historic. Why is it better in Pioneer, though?
So I think that it comes from a need to fill that power vacuum that we've talked about a bit on the show with Luris leaving the format of how the black-red mid-range shell finds a new endgame. Like Mason was saying, like when you have the Blood Engine and you have all this other stuff, finding a way to transition to a new stage of the game to have this finishing element that really impacts the game through having access to Greasefang when you're already playing, Fable the Mirror Breaker, and you want to play all of the cheap black and red interactive spells, it kind of is something you can naturally fit because the mana allows it. But I don't know if Mason, you had more to finish up what you were saying.
No, it's just a powerful mid-range combo deck, I think. And like you mentioned, it's that vacuum, and you get to play that fair game, but you have that big boom into the game. And Greasefang's like a good enough-ish body on its own that it can, like, if you've cleared the way with fatal pushes and maybe thought siege, something like that, it can kind of go the distance.
Yeah, you have draws that race Winota, and I think that's something also really important, that you can't always just control that deck through controlling the board. They can just happen to Seeker's Chariot in play, or like top deck that, or top deck a Winota with a couple of mana dorks left around that you couldn't necessarily pick off, and then suddenly you're behind again, you've lost. Being able to close the game really quickly is really important when a deck like that's running around.
I think Mason's original point, as I'm listening to both of you talk, because like you both played more Pioneer than me, but like Mason's original point, you said that the point that we should make is like Winota and blue-white as like the pillars. What we're talking about has made sense throughout.
Those decks put a lot of pressure on the normal Pioneer format, and I expect that to be replicated here.
Pioneer has two versions of blue-white. Do we expect this format to have two versions of blue-white, being a Yorion version and a non-Yorion version?
I think it matters so much on how easily you can check the Winota deck. I'd have to look at everything to double check, but my guess is that we'll have a Yorion blue-white control deck. There'll be weekends and times where 60 conversions are good too, but the cards that go with the Yorion stuff's pretty strong, and so I kind of expect that. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but
yeah, I think it's really going to matter. Right, we were kind of defining like what are the various ends of the format, right? There's the blue-white kind of towards the top of the range of the spectrum where this is going to try to control the format. And depends on what the middle section of the format looks like, right? Like we kind of have an idea of what the endpoints will be. There's like, Winota and, probably mono red, just aggressive, fast, proactive decks that are trying to end the game as quickly as possible. Then there's going to be, blue-white controls, the obvious answer to what is going to be the top of the spectrum, what it is that's trying to police that. And I feel like, where obviously the mid-range decks kind of come in to try to do the same job of policing specific ends of the fast part of the format while having the muscle to contend with blue-white at the top end, that Yorion comes in to answer a field that is extremely hostile towards the top end, right? A format full of Thoughtseizes and more mid-rangey sacrifice decks, I could see totally wanting Yorion as my way to make sure that once I have set myself up to be in control of the game, I can have the resources to slog through what my opponent's doing. I think that's where Yorion will really come in, and whether or not the middle of the format warrants a response like that is kind of still up in the air.
Yeah, I have never agreed and disagreed with somebody so much at the same time in my entire life, and I want to talk about why. Because I don't think I've ever talked about this on the show. I am not a believer in the Yorion decks, whether it's in Standard, whether it's in Modern, whether it's in whatever. I actually think that it's... Mason's shaking his head like I'm an idiot.
I think if you don't believe in them in Modern, you're just not actually playing Modern.
I think that the exception to this is actually 4-color. I actually think that deck is actually like a really good Yorion deck. But I think historically, whether it's been Standard or historic on Arena, they've actually not been good. I think that those versions of the Yorion would have been better off as 60-card decks. And I'm not convinced that Pioneer changes this. There's a few reasons why, and I'll talk about the Pioneer deck really quick as to, because I think that we're getting pretty close to wrapping this up. I think that, one, there are a few cards that are really important, right? And I'll talk about how their numbers look in these 80-card decks. I think Narset's really important. I think that the Wandering Emperor is really important. I think Teferi, Hero Dominaria is really important. I think that your Counterspell Suite probably is important. I don't think that Absorb is very important. I do think that Memory Deluge, or whatever your draw spell is, whether that's Dig Through Time or Memory Deluge or Treasure, whatever it is, like, you need something there. I think that your Wrath effects are important. What's really interesting about the Yorion decks, though, is they have actually done something really interesting, which we mentioned Supreme Verdict is missing, but if we're looking at like the most recent 7-0 first place blue-white control list, it is literally only playing 2 Supreme Verdict. It's only playing 3 Farewells. I think that there's a lot of room on what you want your Wrath effects to look like. Then you've got 4 portable holes, a bunch of enchantments being Shark Typhoon, Omen of the Sea, whatever. And then a bunch of lands. Here is my argument against why the Yorion versions of Blue-White in Pioneer have always been bad. They've always been bad in Historic and Standard, and I will die on my soapbox, and Mason, you can shake your head at me as much as you would like. You have 4 Wandering Emperors, 4 Hero of Dominaria, 4 Omen of the Sea, 4... Sorry.
Your Narcissist is good to flickers, too.
I'm not talking about the flickers. Hold on.
Oh, sorry. You list all cards that are good to flicker. Sorry.
No. It's okay. I'll explain in a second.
Sure.
4 Omen of the Sea, 4 Shark Typhoon, and 4 Portable Hole. Like, there's a lot of 4-ofs here that don't need to be 4-ofs. Like, in a traditional control deck. And in all honesty, listen, I am obviously a Magic boomer, but there is a 4-mana Archon in both Historic and Pioneer that cares a lot about enchantments entering the battlefield, that gives me a lot more value than anything that Yorion will ever do, and lets me play a 60-card deck and just make 2/2s that will kill my opponent. If I really want to play Omen of the Sea, I think that I have better options. And I also think that 4 Teferi and 4 Wandering Emperor and 34 lands is a great way to mulligan a lot. And I know that the numbers add up to that not technically happening. I think there's an article, I don't remember who it's by, that shows the percentage that it does happen more, and it's something like 7. You're going to mulligan 7% of the time more by having an 80-card deck than a 60-card deck or something. And
it adds like more fringe.
Yeah. I think that by itself leads me to believe, like, if there is not a reason to play Yorion, you should not. And I do not believe that you should in these formats. And I think that the second the pressure is put on the format in both Pioneer and this format, and the second it is literally the focus of the Pro Tour, we will see that change. Just like we did in Modern, every time everybody questioned all the bull crap that happened in Modern, it will also happen here.
It is the focus right now.
Right. I'm saying
it's literally.
I'm saying, I'm calling my shot here, that at the end of this, Blue-White Control will not be a Yorion deck. If it is a Yorion deck, there is a better version of the deck that is multiple colors that is not Blue-White, that does the same thing.
What do you have to say? You've tried to say something a couple of times.
So I think that, like, I agree with you that I think that most of the time Blue-White will not be a Yorion deck. I'm more speaking to the fact that there are metagames where, like, you're saying, like, you could just play 60 cards, mulligan less, and play Archon, but I think that there are games that will push more towards the ceiling of what you're doing and resources you're fighting over. And if the format as a whole coalesces around that being what's important in the games, then you would want to deviate from an obviously, in most metagames better traditional 60-card build for one that wants Yorion and therefore wants Omen and whatever.
I'm not even arguing that you want Archon for what it's worth. I'm just saying that there are 60-card versions that play these cards and want these cards that you could play that mulligan less with this card.
But they have the upside less too, right? Like, they have less opportunity.
Why is the upside less?
Well, because the upside is that you play in a game where you have an 8-card hand and you always have access.
I see. Okay. Like, is that what you're going to say, Mason?
You always have access to your pull ahead spell on the turns that it matters, or in the games that matters, and then in the, like, 93% where you don't mulligan, and maybe in the, like, 80% where your deck is functioning great and you never need the Yorion, then your deck is the same. And in the, you could call it the 13% between the I mulligan because my deck had all of these, like, more access to random outcomes. I forget what the name for it is. There's a mathematical term for it. Versus, like, the 13% where everything's still fine, and I do want the Yorion because I need the slog through what my opponent's doing, and I need access to blinking my Narsets, or a turn where I Teferi, like way late in the game, I, like, have to tuck something with my Teferi that's under pressure, and then I blink my Teferi, and now I'm reset behind my card, or my hand was shredded by Go Blanks and Thoughtseizes against these mid-range decks, and now I just pick up my Yorion and I still have a threat available to me. Like, those games happen more in the format. You're saying that, I'm targeting that segment of the metagame. The metagame's doing this to beat Blue-White, and so I'm moving to a a more value oriented and threat oriented game plan that's more proactive and has Yorion as an even further pull ahead card, that's where I think it really matters. And I think that most of the time you're right, but I think that like losing access to the companion, and especially Yorion, which is so often worth the card you're spending, 4 or 5 bodies good. You blink one thing and draw one card, that's good. Like Mull Drifter in the mid game as you're trying to turn the corner is really necessary. And when that's the case, like that's something that you don't want to give up.
I want to go to Mason because I think he has a really important point. I want to say that it is not Mull Drifter in the mid game. It is often Mull Drifter in the late game, really late in the game, like ground stall Mull Drifter, right? Mason, I just want to go to you because I have a lot of thoughts.
Sure. I think the difference is, and it's a lot of what Abe said, but kind of just like listen to you talk about it. You value the consistency of the like whatever it was, 7% lower, 7% less likely to mulligan. You value that and finding the things a turn earlier a lot more than the impact that the Yorion cards bring to you and Yorion itself in the late game. Because that is the difference, is that like you will mulligan, let's just say for the sake of the conversation, 5% less, and you'll find your card 1 to 2% sooner for your rest in peace or whatever, right? And in formats where that's necessary, it is better to not play Yorion. But the formats where things are slugfest, and you are really good as a deck at making the game go long, I think Yorion brings a big impact. I think that's what it kind of does in the modern deck, and I've seen it do in the Pioneer deck. And I expect it to kind of do in the Explorer deck, where since you're really good at making the game go long, you want the Yorion because you more likely end up in those spots. And having the 60 cards doesn't actually matter because you're not under so much pressure that it's not like Modern where you need to have rest in peace and stuff. And in Modern, we see things like endurance, like even showing that you don't need things like rest in peace and like the graveyard deck, you can kind of overcome these things. And that's obviously different, but I think it's similar enough to Pioneer. And I think what Abe's talking about, where you're losing that ceiling, is important. And more importantly, I think also it becomes is what is the hive mind thing? Because your deck might be 5% more effective, but if every blue-eye control mirror you play, your opponent has Yorion and you don't, you're behind the 8 ball, and now you're always playing Teferi Delver, where you try to stick with Teferi and win. That's really hard to do.
No, I think what you just said is like kind of the key, right? Like, so there's 2 things that I want to say about what you just said, and I think that you just summed it up really well, Mason. I do have a problem with these Yorion decks. I think that they are strategically worse against the metagame. And I will stand behind that because I believe it. But I also think it for a few reasons. One, the first reason that I believe it is actually the number of Wandering Emperors that you are willing to play in your Yorion deck, which by itself leads me to believe that you are not a Yorion deck. You want to draw this card every time. It is very clearly a key pillar of your deck. And, by the way, if you were a 60 card deck, you would still want 4 of this card.
Oh, we forgot to mention Sell the Wreckage and Explore, by the way, for 4.
Oh, we did not. The other thing that I would mention is Farewell. The fact that you're playing 3 Farewell or 4 Farewell, or however many 6-mana Wraths you're playing over your 4-mana Wraths means that you are specifically trying to elongate the game to make your Yorion better. And I don't think that's necessary, right? It's changing the context of your deck. Now, to Mason's point, what if we're playing a mirror? Or what if I'm playing against Bant or Jeskai or any 3-colored Yorion deck? Is my blue-white deck worse off for playing against a 3-color Yorion deck than it would be a 2-color blue-white deck? And I think the answer is yes. To all of my argument here, which I did want to make on this show, I do think that every 2-color blue-white deck is worse than every 3-color Yorion deck. Probably unequivocally. I think that they will have the staying power and longevity to just beat me in that matchup. So I think you guys convinced me. Thank you.
By the way, Flickering Portable Hole, it's pretty good. A lot of tokens in the format.
There is specifically the new 3-mana enchantment, the Kiki Jiki one, is like all over Pioneer right now.
Yeah, I've had a lot of my Make a Treasure friends that come with Kiki Jiki get Portable Hold. Anyways, we went a lot deeper on some decks than we planned to, but that is kind of the baseline for Explore, Pioneer, Light. If you call it Pioneer and Arena, people are gonna know what you mean. But that is kind of the format. It's a way to qualify for the Pro Tour. It is a way to, as Arena gets work towards Pioneer, it's a way to play Pioneer on your phone, stuff, and mobile. It looks to be a pretty fun format. It's gonna be pretty different. Let us know if this is something you like and you want to see more of, like as us covering content. It's kind of like Alchemy, except we kind of know we're going to cover it a bit more because it's like Pioneer, but we're not 100% sure how much you want to hear about it outside of the off season. So we would love to have that know. Make sure to reach out to us on Patreon, on Twitter, everywhere in between. We want to know what you feel about this format. We're kind of trying to gauge what people think. It's pretty important. That's going to do it for the main topic. We talked a lot about a lot of different decks. It's pretty cool. We have a whole section dedicated to this on Discord. We're talking about lots of crazy stuff all the time in deck lists. I post everything that I'm kind of working on there. So you'll see things like Gruul Devoted Druid, which Abe never responded to because he hates me.
I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool idea though, right? Just a little hand on the show. It's kind of cool. You have that. You have Devilish LA combo decks and Standard and Pioneer and Explore. So a lot of really cool stuff going on there, along with these guys' decks as well. And you also get all those other benefits. And one of the last benefits you do get, though, of being a patron is you get to ask questions like this on the show, which is when you have an event coming up, what do you normally do to stay on your game or kind of sharpen your game before the event starts? From Mikey. I'll quickly answer how I feel about this, and I'll throw it to you, too, because I don't have a lot of deep thoughts on this. But I'm addicted to Magic, so I'm kind of always playing Magic, where I take, like this last week, I took a light break. But my light breaking involved me probably playing 20 hours of Magic still. I kind of always playing, and the thing I do to kind of get the sharper the edge is I start really honing in and listening to what everyone else is saying, where when I'm kind of just playing for myself, I'm not as in tune with the discourse, and I try to really listen and get a feel for what people are doing and kind of that sort of thing. So, Abe, what about you?
I just try to play enough that I feel comfortable, sitting at the table, playing games. I'll try to, consume the content that I think is relevant, ask myself the big questions of what I'm going to do for a weekend, what are the things that are important, and determining that. I just want to make sure that I feel comfortable with all the things that I think will happen at the event as far as the gameplay, and make sure that I'm not going to be blindsided by anything and that I've thought about it. That's really most of my preparation. I'm pretty laid back.
I have had listeners of the podcast mention a dirty thing that I do. I don't think it's that bad, but it is kind of close to what Mason said, where I will join Discords and like a lot of Discords. I will jump into a lot of different places where people are talking about an upcoming event, whether it's a GP or things that I'm going to, and see what people are talking about, in addition to really honing in on a format in a deck. And this is actually something that I think is true about Magic. For me, I don't know that this is true, but most people, understanding and having a game plan for my deck is way more important than whatever my opponent is doing and whatever the format is dictating. That can be not true according to specific formats, but I think at the end of the day that if you have a good game plan for what you're trying to do and what your game plan is, it is way better than not knowing what to do going into a given match. And thus, I have decided that that would be my focus, that I'd play 1,000 matches with the deck that I will play at an event before I register a deck that I don't know what to do with. It served me well. I think that there are downsides to that when your deck is bad. I certainly had that at might be the literal last paper GP I played, where I lost to Caroline, who came on the show to talk about my loss to her, where I knew that the best deck going into that GP was Scapeshift and did not change. So there are downsides to my game plan, but I do think that outside of the outliers, you should just try to focus on what is your game plan and have it solidified.
I hate to interrupt you. When you say that statement, I'm curious, have your game plan solidified. Does that kind of encompass knowing what their game plan against you means?
Yes, it
as
does.
Well? Okay, I think that's important to maybe say for some listeners.
Yes.
Yeah, I assume that's what you meant, but I want to be sure.
I'm going to solidify that even more. I think that one of the most common things that people ask me for is, hey, Spencer, can I get a cyborg guide for your brew? It's like, yeah, here's mine. But also, this will change in a week. And the thing is, if you're going into an event, we did a whole episode on this. You should listen to it. You need to be able to write your own cyborg guide. You need to be able to literally say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I believe my opponent is trying to do. And this is how we're going to try and move forward. If you cannot do that, I don't think you're ready for an event. All of the events I've succeeded at, I'm able to do that. And if not, it is just because I'm that much better at Magic than my opponent. And that is just not going to be that common.
I would suggest this, that if you buy sideboard guides and not from like a big team, I mean, the teams just aren't really around these days. But like, let's say you message me or Abe or somebody, and you're like wanting to buy a cyborg guide for 4-color or hammer. Instead of doing that,
I appreciate the fact that you couldn't message Spencer. Just Mason didn't want to
sell cyborg guides.
You know my life.
You just said don't do it. You're out here. Me and Abe are peddling the cyborg guides. But anyways, if you were to send like us or any content creator, anyone, like, hey, this is kind of my cyborg guide, and here's like 3 sentences minimum on like what I'm trying to do in the matchup. They will most likely give you more helpful information because they'll tell you where you're wrong and what's going on. And they will probably respond quicker. Because they
I think the point there is the sentences, right? Like the sentences are actually more important than whatever the heck the crap, the in and outs don't really matter, because the truth is that the context of the matchup is what matters. Yeah.
When you buy my cyborg guys, a little shill real quick, what you're actually buying is what my thoughts are on the matchup and what cards I'm trying to draw and what I'm trying to play to. That's actually what.
Hey, I'm just saying that Quentin's 4-color list won us a lot of money, and Mason's team wouldn't play that list, so our list was way better.
Quentin played my list per card.
I didn't say your list. I said your team's list.
Quentin played my list per card, and that's all that matters. So let's move on to the YouTube comment question. That is where we kind of take a question from YouTube and we will kind of talk about or shout out or something like that.
So the other thing that you can do on the show is get a comment on YouTube read. This comment says, I've learned a lot from this podcast. Thank you guys. Spencer, if you could get a better microphone so that we could not hear the lip noises and breathing, would that be good? But again, wanted to thank you. You guys are, out of all of the podcasts I listen to, the very best, and you've taught me the most in terms of leveling up my play skill, mindset, and I really appreciate what you guys do and the expertise you bring to the table. Looking forward to hearing more about Pioneer as the OP gets rolling. This episode is for you then, Mr. Matthew McCullen. Also, I have the best mic on the podcast. It is actually why my breath and lip stuff is more prevalent. You also already responded to me telling you this. This episode will not be the case. Episode that you commented on is another one like this one where we have to use the same recording. In a lot of episodes, for context of the listeners, we get individual tracks. This one, because of a recording issue, will end up being a single multi-track that gets edited into one. Thus, you will hear more of my great mic and less of their bad mics. This is mostly a joke, but also true. No, I have a great mic, and it does cause issues compared to the mics that Abe and Mason have. We do have an editor to fix this. We have had some both issues with the new announcement of the Pro Tour, which this comment came from, and then the issues that just happened with Mason today that will cause this to not be true. But we will work on continuing to make the sound the best that it can be. And also, thank you. I think that Abe probably, I know that you read this comment, Abe, and you were stoked.
Yeah, I remember seeing this comment in the show notes and being like, this isn't The Plant by Spencer Wright. And I ran to the episode as fast as I could on my browser. I just snapped up YouTube and was like, wow, that means so much to me. Comments like that are like, there are actually so few and far between in content, despite I feel like a lot of people really enjoying a lot of the content that they listen to, and they really mean a lot as people making them. So I'm glad that we're bringing a lot of value to people, and especially having done this for a year, that's one of the nice things I've felt personally about the content that we've been making.
Yeah,
And,
I don't know that if you know this, Abe, but I'll say it on the show. But we have a 100% increase in listeners over the last 365 days on this podcast.
100% me, baby.
And 100% of that is you. So I do thank you for that. But also, like, I will go before Mason goes, but I very much like love these type of comments where it's like, it's a joking, honest feedback, right? Like, yes, you can hear my nose on the episodes where it is just me. My mic is next to my face. Their mics are not. And that is one of the reasons we hired an editor. But also, sorry, I might cry. This is just so kind. I remember the first time that I got these type of comments. I remember all of the comments in between, and they do mean a lot to me. So, thank you.
Yeah, the comments are very nice. Thank you for having them. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. If you like the show, you might like the rest of the shows on the network. You want to check out Drafting Archetypes, Sam Black's limited podcast, all limited all the time, baby. Check that out. New set dropping this week. And so new entire draft things get the edge of the arena cues for your F&M like me, baby. You might want to also check out Common Knowledge, which is a all popper podcast. Pretty sweet, that format. Pretty constantly innovating this set. Just like the last couple, it's got a lot of banger pioneer comments. Sorry, popper comments. Too many P formats. My favorite part of Explorer. Nothing else such as an E. I can't get it mixed up. Just with the magic card. So we want to check that out as well. Make sure to interact with us on social media and places like Twitter, YouTube. Leave comments, like, and subscribe. All those things help support the show in free ways. So if you like the show and you wish you get back on Patreon, no worries. The show will always be free. But that is a way to help us. It helps push us to the algorithm and other stuff, which is super great for us. And if you want to find me, you can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark, twitter.com @MasonEClark. Don't mind if I look like Elon Musk right now. And check out Card Kingdom each and every Thursday. I'm dropping a bunch of deck lists this week for all the formats with New Capenna. Abe, if someone wants to find you, where can they go?
You can find me at twitter.com/morenothings. And if you're going to be at SCGCon Pittsburgh playing some limited, come find me. Say hello. Let me know that you like the podcast or that you don't like the podcast and how we can make it better. All those things would be great. I look forward to seeing people. It's great to go to these events finally. I've really missed out on things since the Invitational. So find me there. Say hello.
First of all, Abe, I'm sorry that I don't have a response for you. That will be changed in the future. You'll be able to give those out at any event you go to. I have a thing that I will say, that if this podcast gets 10 likes on YouTube, yeah, just 10, it's not that many, I will pay Trey to do ads for Oasis Games moving forward, or whoever our sponsor is. Just give us a like. I'll figure it out. I'll pay him out of my own pocket. Additionally, you can find me on Twitch. I am doing a May the 4th be with you stream, as well as a stream probably at the time this podcast comes out on Twitch at twitch.tv/easymedia for the new set. You can like, subscribe. Also follow me on Twitter at Spencer13H.
One last thing. It's on my Twitter, and it comes to events. Thank you, Abe, for bringing that up. I'll be at DreamHack Dallas as a content creator there. I got a little invite, but also more importantly for y'all, I have 2 free giveaways. I have 2 event passes. So you'll be able to do everything there. It just won't be Magic. There's going to be a 10K for Modern going on, a bunch of other Legacy and whatever things. But you can go watch, like, the Valorant finals, the StarCraft, all that stuff going on at DreamHack, the CSGO. So if you want to do that, you go over to twitter.com @MasonEClark. The poll ends April 30th. You just have to like, retweet, and follow. You get a chance to win that. And I'll see you all at DreamHack. And we'll see all of you next week for an episode of Constructed Criticism.